Working the graveyard shift at a hotel, I thought I'd seen every type of guest imaginable. But nothing prepared me for the man who approached me at 3:30 a.m. with tears in his eyes and a story about his dying mother. My name is Sarah, and at 21, I thought I had the night shift figured out. Working from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. at the Grandview Hotel meant dealing with drunk guests, lost key cards, and the occasional medical emergency. But I'd grown comfortable with the routine. My coworker Jake and I would split the duties, finish our tasks by around 2 a.m., and then settle in for the quiet hours until morning management arrived. I'd always prided myself on being the kind of person who helped others, someone who saw the good in people even at their worst moments. My parents had raised me to be compassionate, to lend a helping hand whenever possible. Looking back, I realized that same compassion nearly cost me everything. It was a Tuesday night, or rather Wednesday morning, when everything changed. The hotel was unusually quiet, with most guests settled in their rooms for the night. Jake had decided to catch a quick nap in the break room around 3 a.m., leaving me alone in the main lobby area. I was scrolling through social media, eating a granola bar, when I heard movement near the bar counter. At first, I didn't look up, assuming it was just another guest grabbing some water from the self-service station. We got plenty of those during the night shift, people too dehydrated from travel or too anxious to sleep properly. But then I felt eyes on me. When I glanced up from my phone, there he was. A man I'd estimate to be in his early 40s, standing perfectly still behind the bar counter, just watching me. He was tall, probably around 6 feet, which made him tower over my 5-foot frame even from a distance. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and he wore a simple gray hoodie with jeans. What struck me immediately was how nervous he seemed, almost trembling as he stood there. "Sorry, excuse me," he called out softly. I suppressed a sigh, wondering what this guest could possibly need at this hour. Standard procedure meant I had to help, regardless of how tired I was or how much I wanted to finish the funny video I'd been watching. I stood up, walked over to the bar area, and asked if everything was okay. I even apologized for being on my phone, worried he might complain to management in the morning about unprofessional staff behavior. His voice was so quiet I could barely hear him the first time he spoke. I had to ask him to repeat himself, moving closer to the counter. He seemed genuinely nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the edge of the bar. "Is it okay if I have some water?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Despite his imposing height, everything about his demeanor screamed vulnerability. I told him, of course, pointing toward the water station, but as I started to walk away, he stopped me with another request. "I'm sorry, is it okay if I talk to you for a while?" he said, and then the words that would haunt me for months afterward. "My mom is dying in hospital and I can't sleep." Those words hit me like a physical blow. Just 3 weeks earlier, I'd lost my grandmother, someone who'd been like a second mother to me. The grief was still raw, the pain still fresh in my memory. When this stranger mentioned his dying mother, every empathetic instinct I possessed kicked into overdrive. Against my better judgment, against every safety protocol I should have followed, I agreed to stay and talk with him. He introduced himself as Marcus and asked if I smoked. When I admitted I did, he suggested we step outside so he wouldn't disturb other guests with our conversation. The rational part of my brain should have said no, should have suggested we talk in the well-lit lobby where security cameras could monitor our interaction. Instead, I found myself following this stranger into the darkness outside the hotel. We sat on a bench near the main entrance, and Marcus began telling me about his mother's condition. She was in the final stages of cancer, he explained, and the doctors had given her only days to live. He'd traveled here with his sister to be close to the hospital, but the stress was overwhelming him. As someone who'd recently experienced loss, I found myself genuinely moved by his story. I offered what comfort I could, sharing some of my own experiences with grief and loss. Marcus seemed grateful for the conversation, telling me how kind I was being, how much it meant to have someone listen. He shared more details about his life, painting a picture of someone who'd overcome significant challenges. He'd been homeless for a period, he said, living on the streets until his sister took him in and helped him get back on his feet. They weren't from this city, he explained, but had come here specifically because of the medical situation. Everything seemed genuine, and I found myself feeling genuinely sorry for this man who appeared to be going through one of the worst experiences imaginable. But then something shifted in the conversation, so subtly that I almost missed it. "Are there cameras out here?" he asked suddenly, his tone casual but his eyes scanning the area around us. He quickly followed up with what seemed like a reasonable explanation. "I wouldn't want you getting in trouble for being out here." At the time, I didn't recognize this for what it was: a probing question designed to gather information about the hotel's security setup. I gave him a vague response, assuring him that I wouldn't get in trouble without confirming or denying the presence of surveillance equipment. I noticed he seemed disappointed by my non-answer, but I didn't think much of it at the time. The conversation continued, but gradually became more personal than I was comfortable with. Marcus started asking questions that seemed innocuous at first, but began to feel invasive. He wanted to know about my personal life, my relationships, my plans for the future. When I mentioned feeling cold and suggested we head back inside, his response sent the first real chill down my spine. "Come here, give me a hug," he said, reaching toward me. "It'll warm you up." Every instinct in my body screamed danger, but I tried to rationalize his behavior. Maybe he was just socially awkward, I told myself. Maybe grief was making him act inappropriately. I declined the hug as politely as I could and headed back toward the lobby, with Marcus following close behind. Inside, he asked if he could get some coffee and continue our conversation. By this point, I was alone in the lobby, Jake still napping in the break room, and I felt trapped. I didn't want to anger this man by refusing his request, especially given his size advantage and the fact that we were essentially alone in the building. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let him stay. We sat in the lobby seating area, and Marcus's questions became increasingly personal and inappropriate. He asked if I had children, if I wanted kids someday, whether I had a boyfriend. When I told him I had a fiancé, which was a lie intended to discourage any romantic interest, his response was deeply unsettling. "Do you love him?" he asked, then quickly added, "I mean no harm in asking these questions, you're so beautiful." The compliment felt predatory rather than kind, and my anxiety levels spiked dramatically. My brain was screaming at me to get out of this situation, to find an excuse to leave or to wake up Jake, but I felt paralyzed by a combination of fear and misplaced politeness. "Come sit next to me," Marcus said, patting the seat beside him on the couch. "I won't bite." That phrase, delivered with what I can only describe as a predatory smile, finally broke through my paralysis. I quickly fabricated an excuse about needing to prepare the area for the morning shift and mentioned that my manager would be arriving soon. At that exact moment, Jake emerged from the break room to get coffee, and I watched Marcus's entire demeanor change. He immediately stood up, seeming startled by Jake's appearance, and quickly announced that he needed to return to his room. But before leaving, he did something that still gives me chills to think about. "Tell your mom I was asking for her," he said to me, forcing a brief hug before heading toward the elevators. It was clearly intended for Jake to overhear, designed to make it seem like Marcus was a family friend rather than a stranger who'd been making me increasingly uncomfortable for the past 2 hours. I stood there in shock as Marcus disappeared into the elevator, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. Jake, unaware of the situation, went about his morning routine, and I helped him prepare for the day shift without saying a word about my experience. It was nearly 6 a.m., and I was counting down the minutes until my manager arrived and I could finally leave. But Marcus wasn't finished with me yet. At around 5:50, as I sat near the front desk waiting for my shift to end, he appeared behind me seemingly out of nowhere. "I think I'll go to the shops," he announced. "I'm out of smokes." I didn't respond, hoping he would just leave, but he had one more request. He asked to borrow my pen, which I reluctantly handed over, and then walked away toward the exit. 5 minutes later, he returned and gave me back my pen, but this time he had something else. "I wrote a note for you," he said, standing uncomfortably close to me. He dropped a piece of cardboard behind my back, making sure no one else could see the exchange, and then walked away again. My hands were shaking as I picked up the note and read its contents. Most of it was fairly innocuous, thanking me for the conversation and expressing sympathy for his situation, but one line made my blood run cold. "Wear tighter work pants for me next time. They'd look good. followed by a winking emoticon and the word harmless. There was nothing harmless about that message, and I finally understood the true nature of the situation I'd found myself in. Panicked, I ran to the office where I could monitor the security cameras and see exactly where Marcus was. The footage showed him pacing outside the main entrance, clearly waiting for something or someone. He would walk into the building, look around as if searching for me, then return outside to continue his pacing. Most disturbing of all, I watched as he positioned himself behind a corner near the entrance, hiding from view while maintaining a clear line of sight to the lobby. When my manager finally arrived, I immediately told him what had happened and showed him the note. He instructed me to leave through the back entrance to avoid any potential confrontation with Marcus, who was still lurking outside the main entrance. I practically ran to my car, constantly checking over my shoulder and jumping at every sound. My heart didn't stop racing until I was safely inside my apartment with the door locked behind me. I thought the nightmare was over, but I was wrong. As I sat on my couch, still processing everything that had happened, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Marcus," the message read. "Thanks for the chat. Talk soon," with another winking emoticon. Somehow, during our interaction, he had obtained my personal phone number without my knowledge. I blocked the number immediately and reported the entire incident to hotel management. The gravity of what could have happened hit me all at once. This man had spent hours manipulating me, using my compassion against me, gathering information about my work schedule, the hotel's security measures, and my personal life. He had my phone number, knew where I worked, and had demonstrated a clear willingness to wait and watch for opportunities to approach me again. Hotel management took the situation seriously, immediately banning Marcus from the property and filing a report with local police. I took a month off work, partly to let the situation cool down and partly because I was too shaken to return to night shifts immediately. The experience fundamentally changed how I approach interactions with strangers, especially in vulnerable situations like working alone at night. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone used your kindness against you? What would you have done differently in my shoes? Share your thoughts and similar experiences in the comments below.